Yeah, can I place an order? Okay, thanks. Yeah, 40 alcohol hand wash dispensers, 300 rolls of toilet paper, soft, 5 kilos of pasta, and 200 litres of long life milk, skimmed. All right, thanks very much. Bye. Weirdly, one of the things I get asked the most is, can we hear the Soundcore Motion Plus, which is of course pound for pound of the best speaker in the world, 75 quid at the moment in the UK, absolute stonking bargain. Can we hear it along with the Minirig Subwoofer? As you may or may not know, the Minirig Subwoofer doesn't have to be played with other Minirig speakers. It can be used as a standalone subwoofer. However, there are no controls, so you're left with the default tuning. The default tuning is quite smooth on the Mark III. The Mark II subwoofer did have an upper bass peak to match the lack of upper bass peak on the Mark II Minirigs. However, this is much smoother and goes deeper than the Mark II. It's going to be a better match for more speakers, if indeed you want to use it as a standalone subwoofer. Officially rated 48 to 120 Hertz. It does play into the higher frequencies, around 300 Hertz, in almost a significant way. So it does fill out the upper bass as well. Now, could use a Bluetooth receiver, couldn't use auxiliary. I say I'm doing it via auxiliary from my Samsung S10 mobile phone because I didn't have a working Bluetooth receiver. I thought I would at the time I did this test. I don't. I could have used the Minirigs. The Minirigs themselves can be used as a standalone Bluetooth receiver. However, the downside is it's a little bit fiddly. You've got to go into the app, got to press mute. It wasn't ideal. I thought I'll do this as a rough and ready test. It's only a bit of fun, and then I'll do it with a decent Bluetooth receiver when I get one off Amazon that supports aptX HD, and see what the difference is. I can tell you straight off the bat, when I play auxiliary using my auxiliary out, we're talking line level inputs, of course, and you're in the hands of the God exactly what sort of volume you get. It does play quieter in auxiliary, doing it the way I've done it, than in straight Bluetooth mode. Bear that in mind. However, in this first test, where I'm comparing it at 60% with the Xtreme 2, because it's so extreme, I have normalized them. So first of all, I've adjusted a little bit in the actual volumes while I'm recording, and then I'm normalizing as much as I can to get the volumes as close as possible together. So you've got a real world idea of what it does in the real world. Now, why the Xtreme 2? Well, obviously because it has that very nice deep bass. About 250 quid retail. Now, 75 quid, 140 quid for the subwoofer, 215 quid. The Soundcore Motion Plus, already a bargain, along with the Minirig Subwoofer, is actually cheaper than buying a single. Of course, you do get different deals all the time, but at the time of this video, while I've looked it up, Xtreme 2 is actually more expensive than this combination. So, around 60%, all of them. I am going to compare it Bluetooth only. I am going to compare low gain, high gain. Now, of course, pressing the button, the multi-function LED on the Minirig Subwoofer, it goes from low gain to high gain. Why is that an issue? Well, it's not an issue. It's a benefit. The point being, in low gain mode, less of a boost via the preamp, less noise, say higher quality signal. The downside, of course, being it doesn't go as loud. So you've got a choice of low gain, high gain. I'm going to show you both modes in this comparison. So the low gain, high gain, Bluetooth only, Xtreme 2 on battery. I'm not going to do plug-in power. It's only a bit of fun. I'm keeping it simple. So it will go louder, just to tell you. It's about 25% louder when you plug it into the mains. Of course, a lot more awkward to go portable while it's plugged into the mains, isn't it? So my comparison. So what did I learn from that? Well, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Sounds quite nice. It's not a bad match. The Soundcore Motion Plus, I wasn't expecting much, other than obviously if you've got a subwoofer, it's going to go a bit deeper. It's actually not a bad match. It's quite a subtle difference when I use low gain, and it's quite in line with the Xtreme 2. So Soundcore Motion Plus, by the way, so we've got 40 watts and 30 watts. Technically on the paper, we've got 70 watts playing 30 watts because it's on battery. But we're normalizing anyway, so that shouldn't matter at these volumes. Low gain with the Soundcore Motion Plus, the bass is quite similar to the Xtreme 2. On high gain, it almost makes it sound a bit thin, which it isn't on the Xtreme 2, as you may well know. It's got a decent low bass, pretty boosted, but it's very resonant, very round, and you feel it. It's a nice bass if that's, you know, your thing. This is a bigger bass, but it still sounds matched. It sounds a bit boosted, Soundcore Motion Plus. I'm not saying it's a flat frequency response, but I'm saying it still sounds nice and it doesn't sound too disjointed. So yes, actually, I did like playing the Soundcore Motion Plus with a subwoofer. We're talking 75 quid and 140 quid, 215 quid. At the moment, retailing around 240, 250 quid. This is a cheaper combination. Of course, this is not a particularly hassle-free way of doing it. But as a bit of fun, it does work and it does sound quite nice. I did try it with other speakers, but I thought, they're bass light. They may appreciate a bit of the Minirig Subwoofer. For instance, the JBL Flip 4 and some of the Truett speakers. But actually, there wasn't enough oomph in the speaker itself to match the subwoofer even in low gain, and it was disjointed. This was the best match actually of all the speakers I tried, even though, and it was going to be the one I was going to do anyway. So that worked out quite nice. And allowed ultimately to go, no volume matching what the headroom is. And actually, at this point, I thought actually there was a speaker I left out that I should have put in, which I didn't put in at 60%. And what speaker do you think it was? Of course, it's the other budget bargain, the W King D8, the 50-watt mini boombox. Not mini, but mini in terms of the price, about 80 quid. So I'm sticking that in the mix as well for my maximum test.
How heavy is that? Light work with the bass on the track, on my face to the back like I'm taking a slap. How heavy is that? Light work with the bass on the track, on my face to the back like I'm taking a slap. Light work with the bass on the track, on my face to the back like I'm taking a slap. How heavy is that? Light work with the bass on the track, on my face to the back like I'm taking a slap.
So overall, the W King D8 with its 50 watts is louder at -16.5 than the Motion Plus with its subwoofer at high gain. I say it's subwoofer, of course it's the Minirig's subwoofer. It's also louder in peak terms, 108.2, 106.5, and it's louder in the bass. Peak, -22, plays 23.3. Two things to bear in mind. The Motion Plus is playing via auxiliary. It plays a bit quieter than in Bluetooth. And the bass is nicer and rounder. There's a big drop off before you get this bass peak again at about 45 Hertz on the W King D8. Now, if we look at lower bass peak, say 60 Hertz, about -35 on the D8, -26, about 9 dB louder. At 60 Hertz though, for the Motion Plus, because the Minirig subwoofer is filling out nicely the bass, it's a thinner bass peak on the W King D8, albeit louder. In terms of Motion Plus with sub versus Motion Plus in Bluetooth, the difference in average terms, they're about the same. Why? Because it's playing quieter over most of the frequency range when it's in auxiliary mode, except it's been filled out in the bass, as you would hope. Now, Motion Plus with a sub versus Motion Plus with Bluetooth, both 19.6, about the same in average terms, and in actual peaks, a higher peak on the Bluetooth. Why? Because auxiliary plays quieter on the Motion Plus. The way I've got it daisy changed from phone to subwoofer and then back into Motion Plus, it's quieter than in Bluetooth mode. But the bass obviously filled out by the sub. So it's making up the difference, and that's why on average they're about the same. But peak terms, yes, in Bluetooth it's actually got a higher peak than with the sub. But of course, a bigger peak because it's stronger everywhere else except in the bass. In bass terms, 27.7, 4.5 decibels louder in the bass for the Motion Plus in auxiliary mode, even though overall it's quieter because the Minirig Sub is giving you a bass which doesn't exist otherwise for Bluetooth. In terms of the Xtreme 2 on battery, we know it plays around 30 watts rather than the 40 watts if it was plugged into plug-in power. It's the quietest of all of them, -20. So that's quieter than the Motion Plus in Bluetooth, and indeed with the sub. In terms of bass peak, just behind the Motion Plus with its sub. Remember, auxiliary plays quieter, but it's the thinner bass compared to the Motion Plus with the subwoofer. At 60 Hz, 27 dB, almost identical for Motion Plus with the subwoofer. Of course, this is default mode, bass up. I could have pushed that bass using the Soundcore app if I had wanted to. Things to point out there, that wasn't custom mode as I did in the 6%. This was bass up. I thought I wanted to see what it actually does. Left in default mode. It's something people often say when you keep using custom mode, it's not very fair on the other speakers. And I say, well, I would do a custom mode if you could embed it, the EQ into firmware. I don't mess around with software because for me it's more of a hassle than it's worth. But when you can embed it, I use it. However, I've left it in default mode for that maximum test. You could actually get more maximum volume out of it by using custom settings. Doesn't have to be mine, but obviously pushing the custom anywhere above 0 is going to make it louder. However, pushing the bass too much, you will get some distortion. So even my custom mode now errs on the side of caution. However, you can push it higher. Of course, it also suffers from the fact it's auxiliary, so it wasn't quite what I was expecting again in terms of maximum volume against the Bluetooth because it goes quieter in auxiliary. However, the subwoofer obviously still made the difference. It's still got a nice bass. However, still head and shoulders kind of above them. However, I've got to say, bigger bass, goes louder, got the bigger bass kick, but there is a decent amount of distortion going on. It's not particularly clean, whereas the subwoofer remains pretty clean even at maximum volumes. Be interesting when I get my Bluetooth receiver, if we can get a bit more volume out of it, and then what the comparison is. However, I was on paper, with auxiliary and the sub is about overall of the same volume as Bluetooth. However, it's shaped in a very different way. Of course, the Xtreme 2, it doesn't go that loud on battery. You've got to plug it in. I just didn't want to do the plug in. I didn't think it was particularly relevant, as this is more about the subwoofer and the Soundcore Motion Plus, which is win-win. Strictly speaking, it's about twice as much for the subwoofer as it is for the Motion Plus. But however, if you've got a Motion Plus, maybe you can pick up a second-hand Mark III. I'm saying the Mark III because I tried it with the Mark II, wasn't such a good match because it's not such a smooth response. It's got the upper bass peak, which I don't particularly like on the Mark II. But if you've got a Motion Plus, it might be worth picking up a cheap, if you can get Mark III subwoofer. It sounds not just fun actually. It does sound nice because it's if you're only going to have one speaker, because it's got a nice stereo spread with a lot of detail on the Soundcore Motion Plus. See, with two, if you're going to go stereo, well, stereo as in two separate speakers, then I still think the Minirig system wins out. However, with a single speaker for your stereo, because of course the Minirig satellite speakers themselves are mono. That's not a bad way to go if you're thinking about building up a Minirig system and you've already got a Motion Plus speaker. But of course, still goes louder on the D8. An Xtreme 2 doesn't go as loud as you would expect an Xtreme speaker to go. So I hope you got something out of that, even if it was just a bit of fun. You can see what one of these Minirig subwoofers can do. And of course, you can daisy chain them as well. Maybe I should try it with two speakers. It'll be even more fun. But I hope you got something out of my video, and thank you for watching.
UK